Well, if you've ever wondered how drums are made, this is how it all starts, right here in the shell shop. As you can see, we buy an awful lot of maple here at DW, and before you can make a drum shell, you've got to make plywood. So here we're making the preparation to clip the wood. Clipping the veneer is kind of a tedious task. It's got to be somewhat specific to the size, but not all the way specific, because at every step along the way, we do trim off a little bit here, trim off a little bit there, until it becomes the right size piece. The plywood is going to be made by cross-laminating the wood. Now what I mean by that is you've got short grain veneer and you've got long grain veneer, and putting those two together make the plywood strong. So here we will put the plywood into the press. Once that press is closed, it's at 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and it smashes that wood together to about 3,100 pounds. Once it pops out of the press 3 minutes later, you've got flat, pretty nice looking plywood. And then we put it into the saw, and now we're going to cut it to length. This plywood has to be cut to very specific lengths. 7-ply shell is 2-3-2. So the 2-ply outer veneer will be the longest cut, the 3-ply core will be shorter, and the 2-ply inner will be the shortest. So when we make this plywood and cut it, it's got to be used right away. And why is that? It's because the moisture content in the air changes from day to day. One day it can be Santa Ana winds here in California. The next day it can be moist air and fog rolling in off the Channel Islands. So if it sits too long, it'll shrink in size. So cutting this veneer and using it right away is very, very important. When we arrive at the shell presses, of course, we've got to glue the plywood together. So the first thing we want to do is send it through our custom glue that we use. It's our own formula of glue. A technician is going to roll the shell together. It doesn't look much like a shell in the beginning, but it's going to be once we put it into the drum heaters. Once we take it over to the drum heaters and put it into the press, we close the outer platen. Then we pull down, as you can see, the tapered pin which spreads the inner platens to the outer. It puts it under 2,600 pounds of pressure at 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Now it'll stay in this hot, very, very pressurized machine for about 5.5 minutes. Once we release the pressure and take the shell out of the machine, we do something that no one else really does. We take it and put it into another press that is designed to be a cold press. Once we put the shell that's very, very hot into that cold press, close the outer platen, then the inner platen, that is 2,600 pounds of cold pressure. This is done so that the wood can't move anywhere. It crystallizes the glue, and once we release it out of this particular press, it is hard as a rock and is very, very round. So, a harder shell is a more resonant drum shell. A rounder shell is easier to tune. We call this whole process cool tempered shells. The next step, of course, is putting in the reinforcing hoops, if we indeed need that. Some of our shells don't use reinforcing hoops and some do. We cut the material with a finger joint, put it through a glue spreader, insert it into the shell, top and bottom, and then take it over to the whole shell press process once more. So that reinforcing hoop truly becomes part of the shell. After we have prepared the shells with the reinforcing hoops, we're going to take them to the sanding process. Now this is just a rough sanding to get the inside of the shell and the outside of the shell done before it goes up to timbre matching. Timbre matching is a process where first I will get the intervallic relationship, then I will get the color tone of the maple together, and then the next thing is to pick out a grain structure that looks like they want to go together as a drum set. When that's all done, now that drum set, or all those shells, will live together as a family throughout the rest of the process. So once we've timbre matched the drums, then we take the journey over to the paint department. Now, painting is such an ordeal. There's a very involved, detailed process, if you will, that will really get us to the beautiful luster and the fantastic myriad of colors that we can produce. The graphics department is something that DW is very proud of. Louis Garcia is just an artist and a half. He's fantastic. He paints drums for all kinds of artists. You name it, he's painted it. He's done so many different types of tours and graphics. For example, Neil Peart's Time Machine. What an involved, difficult paint job that was, but it was absolutely a stunning drum set when we were done. The staining department. This is something that has to be done very quickly because there's not much of a shelf life for that stain. So we get it on there and he rubs it into the wood so that the grain comes popping out. Finish ply, you would think, would be a pretty easy process. Just wrap the drum. But no, not at DW. Because, first of all, the material likes to be adhered to itself. So you can't have a butt seam all the way up and down the drum. But if you lap seam the finish, all the way to the top and bottom, when you put a drum head on, it would be off center because there's 2 layers of material on one side and only one on the other. So what we do is we cut the tab out of the top and the bottom and butt seam those 2 areas and lap seam the center. We close up the seam with a solvent so it literally melts itself to itself and it's on there forever. After the paint process is done, it's nowhere near finished, because we have to take it in and with 1500 grit paper we sand the lacquer till it's like a matte finish, and then we put it in between these rollers on this buffing machine where it turns the shell in and out on like a screw process while this belt goes over the top and polishes the shell. Once we're done with that, there's got to be a bearing edge put on the drum. This is a process that is quite important, very tedious indeed. We grind the shell first, and then cut the bearing edge profile, and then check it on a granite slab that is very, very accurate, to 2.5 thousandths of an inch. Your hair is thicker than that. We put the light down through the shell to make sure that it's totally even all the way around the bottom of the bearing edge. So at this point, the drums have got to be drilled. This is the new CNC drilling machine at DW. The first thing that happens is the shell obviously goes on, a plate is put on top, a pressure device comes down to hold the drum in place, a special indicator comes out to check the size of the drum, and then we activate the drill. That's a multi-spindle drill head that goes in and selects the right size drill for the particular lug pattern, or the air hole, or for the legs, or if it might be spurs for a bass drum. This drum can be done all on this machine with all these options. This machine will also do size 6 all the way to 26-inch drums. We use another type of alternate machine for the snare drums. And the reason we do that is because we put in the snare bed on this router that's affixed to this drilling machine. All of these machines are CNC, computer numerical controlled machines. When we get to this stage of the operation, we consider this the pre-assembly area. And what we're doing is we're scrutinizing the shell, cleaning it up, rechecking the bearing edge, because hey, we're only humans and I like to have everyone check each other's work. Once we've checked that edge again, then we play the shell, the timbre of the shell, into an analyzer, which gives us what the note of the shell is. We put that into the computer. The computer then will ask what type of shell it is. Is it a VLT shell? Is it an X shell? Is it a standard shell? Is it maple? Is it birch? All of this information is fed into the computer and a custom printed tag comes out. So you can tell what type of shell you've got, what the timbre note value is, etc. From here, we're going to go to the final assembly. Here's where the lugs are put on. Here's where the spurs are put on bass drums. This is where the heads are put on, and the counter hoops. We also want to make sure that everything is done as efficiently as possible because we're going to tune this drum. It's just like an automobile factory. Somebody put in the dashboard, someone screwed on the tires, somebody put the engine in. The last thing you do is start the engine up. So we like to start up every drum before it's shipped out. Every drum is carefully tuned. The reason for that is we've got to make sure the bearing edges are really right. We've got to make sure that the drum heads are working properly, etc. All these things come into play. So when you get your drum and you take it out of the box, it's pretty close to ready to go. We have a final room of inspection, which is called the White House. And in the White House, we have intense light everywhere, where we can check all the particulars on the drum, make sure there's no scratches, make sure that all the bursts and fades work together, make sure the color is true and correct. And once we line all the drums up, we take a picture of them for archival purposes. Once we've taken the picture of the drum set, it's ready for shipping. It's been truly handcrafted and every attention to detail has been taken care of. All of the artisans at DW have tried to live up to your expectations, and that's what this room is all about. So it gets packaged from here and goes all over the world. We're very proud of our custom shop facility and hope that you have truly enjoyed the tour.